The 2024 election, a new poll reveals 56% of Democrats and 2 in 3 adults say President Biden should end his bid for a second term. Most Democrats in Congress still support the president, but calls for him to step aside are growing. President Biden is campaigning in Michigan today after wrapping up a 3-day NATO summit in Washington, D.C. In a rare solo press conference, Biden fumbled another name while defending his candidacy. Let's listen.
Look, I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president. So let's start there. Number one, the fact is that the consideration is that I think I'm the most qualified person to run for president. I beat him once, and I will beat him again.
Here with more is Yahoo Finance's Rick Newman. Rick, you've been tracking all of what is coming out of President Biden's mouth, what's coming out of former President Trump's mouth. What are the two saying right now? What's Biden's chance, especially with what the shifts in the Democratic Party this week?
Well, Trump hasn't been saying much, surprisingly. I mean, this might be the quietest he's been in the last 10 years because he realizes Biden has had a problem with his terrible debate performance and now trying to prove that he's fit for another 4 years in the office. Just to go back to that clip, I mean, Biden was trying to praise Vice President Kamala Harris, and he stepped over himself by using the wrong name. Otherwise, in that press conference, I mean, he was generally coherent, and he actually gave something of a tour de force on foreign policy. I was impressed listening to him describe the nexus between China and Russia. He actually kind of made some news that I think was completely overlooked, which was that there might be some moves out of Europe in coming days to try to further isolate China, as China is trying to push all these exports onto other markets. He sort of said, I don't want to get ahead of myself on this, but I think you're going to be something coming out of Europe. I mean, he had a very sophisticated understanding, and he really did sound like the old school guy who used to chair the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and knows all these leaders. But that's not what everybody's talking about this morning. Everybody's talking about he called President Zelensky of Ukraine before the press conference. He referred to him as Putin rather than Zelensky. He did correct himself right away. He recognized that mistake, but then he described Kamala Harris as Trump, and he did not correct himself on that. And that's what everybody's talking about. As I try to decode, like, what is the state of Joe Biden's mind, he sucks at names. Yeah. He's always messing up names. His thinking is coherent. I mean, he sometimes he cannot muster the words, and finally they come out, or they come out a little bit jumbled, and you can figure out. But there's something, he gets stuck on names. So he has Trump at the top of his head, and so instead of saying Kamala Harris, he says Trump, because Trump is sitting right there, and then he doesn't realize that he said it. So I don't think this changes anything. This press conference, one way or the other, about he's more likely, he's less likely to drop out. I think the drama continues.
So, Rick, I guess my question to you is there anything, and Biden kind of talked about this a little bit last night, touching on it very briefly, but are there just some voters that he's not going to be able to convince to change their minds at this point, just in terms of anything he does to try to reassure the fact that, yes, he is fit for a second presidency, just because of the gaffes that we have seen over the last couple of weeks, he's not going to be able to change their minds at this point? And I guess, what does that then do in terms of the shaping of the Democrats?
You have to think about different buckets of voters. Yeah. So there certainly are some voters who would vote for Biden over Trump if Biden were a corpse. They would take that over Trump. So that's one bucket. Then there are the hardcore Trumpers. They're going to go for Trump no matter what. Then what we're really talking about is the swing voters in 6 or 7 states. And Shauna, I think there are a lot of undecided voters, believe it or not. There are some polls that show that something like 20% of voters haven't made up their mind. And it's not because they don't know one or the other candidate. These are the double haters. They hate both candidates. They hate the choices that they have in this election. And both candidates, Donald Trump and Joe Biden, are going for those people. And those are the people who are going to determine who the next president is. So yes, there are persuadable people out there. And we've seen presidential candidates before that people don't really love. We have not really confronted the age issue before the way we're doing it this year. So I'm not sure there's a template for how voters are going to break at the last minute if age is their biggest concern about Joe Biden.
That's a great point. All right, Rick, always great to talk to you. Thanks so much for joining us here on Set today.